Good afternoon. My name is Carol Peters, and I'm proud to serve as the president and CEO of United Way Next. I am thrilled that today we're hosting a financial wellness session because I'm a big proponent of financial wellness and taking initiative and saving for the future and all those good things. So I'm curious to hear what we're going to hear today from our guest speakers and this panel. I'd like to introduce Kirsten Rust. Kirsten is our newest team member. And Kirsten, if you want to just unmute for a second and introduce yourself to those who have joined today, that would be great.
Yeah. So yes, as Carol said, I'm the new membership and engagement coordinator with United Way Next. And I've been in this role for about a month, so I'm still pretty new. Previously, though, I do have quite a bit of experience with the United Way Network. I was a CEO for United Way of Kankakee and Iroquois counties here in Illinois for about 3 years. Then I took a step back and paused. I did a mom pause for a couple of years and focused my time at home raising my little one. And this is sort of my first foray back into traditional work. So I'm happy to be back with something that I'm familiar with, United Way Next, and supporting other United Way alums, professionals, and retirees.
Thanks, Kirsten. We're grateful to have you on the team. And for those of you who have met Ivy Cirillo, she's on vacation this week. So I asked Kirsten to kind of be here as we go through today's session. So again, thanks to all of you for joining. Just some general housekeeping. We would love for you to engage in the chat as we go. There will be a Q&A at the end, but as you're feeling like there's questions you want to ask, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We also would encourage you to put your name and where you're calling in from today. If you're at a local United Way or currently working in nonprofit, please mention that. At the very end, when you go to log off today, there will be a survey that will pop up, and it's helpful for us if you take the survey. It's usually 3 simple questions, but it really provides us with feedback for our guest speakers as well as our Engage and Exchange work group who plan all of these programs for us. And then we are recording the session, so we will send the recording link out afterwards. So for those of you listening in afterwards, we're sorry you missed it today, and hopefully you're enjoying listening to the session. The slides will also be made available to all of you at the end. And if there's any resources shared, I'll try to capture those so that those can be included in the follow-up email as well. So with that said, without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Andrea Sok, who is a United Way alum and United Way Next member. And welcome Andrea into the session and let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Carol. It's great to meet you all. Like Carol said, I am a United Way alum. I worked at Worldwide for 5+ years. If you have a Women United program, we probably interacted at some point because I managed Women United for several years, and also emerging leaders and other affinity groups. Great to have you all here. I'm excited to welcome our panelists. I'm really here just to moderate. This is not my area of expertise. I'm going to leave it to the professionals, Blake and Bonnie, who I've known for a couple of years now. Absolute experts in what they do, and also just really great people. Blake is the founder and CEO of LifeCents. He's celebrating 20 years. I know he was born yesterday. 20 years of LifeCents, financial wellness company. He's based here in DC. And Bonnie is the Senior Vice President, Head of Financial Health Philanthropy at Wells Fargo. And we've partnered together on a couple different initiatives, and I've just had the pleasure of hearing from them and soaking in their words of wisdom. So I'm gonna, first I'll let Blake and Bonnie, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your roles, because that was a very short introduction. So I'll let you, Bonnie, I don't know if you want to go first to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Andrea. So welcome, everyone. Pleasure to see you. And it's nice, as everyone was saying, to see you on video. It's a treat when you're presenting to actually see the faces. So thank you. As Andrea said, I lead Financial Health Philanthropy for the Wells Fargo Foundation. And just a little bit of information about the Wells Fargo Foundation. We have 3 core areas of focus, and that's financial health, small business growth, small business growth, and housing access and affordability. Those 3 areas cover the entire country. So the work I do is primarily nationally focused with local impact. And then we also have a community relations team that works throughout the country in the local markets And they're really the connective tissue between the bank and the local community. So you may actually know some of my colleagues that work for Wells Fargo in your local communities as well. So I'll turn it over to Blake.
Thank you, Bonnie. Great to be here. Thanks everyone for spending the early afternoon with us. And to Bonnie's point, good to see everyone's faces as well. Makes this enjoyable. Want this definitely to be a conversation. But just by way of background, as Andrea mentioned, I started LifeCents 20 years ago. Interestingly, prior to that, my first job out of undergrad, my mentor was actually, or is currently a United Way alum. So I'm connected there. And also one of our current clients is a statewide United Way chapter. I'm not going to mention which one simply because I'm going to show a little bit of data and I don't want anybody kind of, we're not showing any personal information, but just we're using some data from their implementation of LifeCents. But just generally speaking, LifeCents is a financial wellness platform where we are very focused on the behavioral model. So we want to turn information into action. We do a lot of work with employees across the board, whether that's with nonprofits or private sector. But we also do a number of initiatives with Bonnie and the Wells Fargo Foundation, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. So again, delighted to be here and look forward to your questions and the conversation ahead of us.
Great. And like Carol mentioned, if you think of something, feel free to drop it in the chat. We have time at the end to answer questions, but if it helps to document it here, please, by all means, drop them in the chat. But we can go ahead and get started with our questions. So I'm gonna throw some data points at you. I think we can all agree that financial stress is a huge problem for ourselves, our employees, our coworkers. We're all feeling it. Most people we've seen an uptick of financial stress since COVID. And actually 17% of nonprofit employees are actually living within ALICE, which I know we're all familiar with ALICE data. But I'm going to ask Bonnie and Blake, what are you seeing in particular into the nonprofit sector? What issues are rising to the top for those nonprofit employees and nonprofit clients that you work with?
Blake, you want me to get started?
Sure. So what's interesting is, again, we're very data focused, and so we have a lot of data to support our observations. And so first, I don't think you have to look too far to understand that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of turmoil around us, and that uncertainty is playing out in financial, in the form of financial stress, and the impact that financial stress has on employees, as we all know, in some way, shape, or form. It is a huge distraction for people at work. But interestingly, this graph here is showing that between nonprofit employees and kind of all employees generally, there's not a huge difference in the impact of this uncertainty, the impact of kind of where people are with key financial metrics, and these are based on a research-based framework. These 8 measures are kind of representative of these key financial health indicators. While there may not be a lot of difference between nonprofit employees and all employees, I think what stands out here is there's still a lot. Everyone is suffering right now, and so I think that speaks to the need to really focus on this as a strategic priority for your organization, for your employees. And as we go through this as well, I think what matters here is this is data from employer clients, whether it's nonprofits or other. And what matters is that those employers have this data. The fact that they are implementing at least some level of a financial wellness program to understand the needs of their employees, I think is critical, because otherwise you're throwing a dart at the dartboard. If you assume that the needs of your employees or where they are in terms of financial stress or what they're dealing with in terms of their personal financial lives, I think very often what we have found is employers don't really fully understand what's going on. So I think employers who are willing to survey their employees and get their feedback, allow the employees to tell their story, are the ones that are really coming out ahead in terms of helping their employees navigate not just what's going on in the market and the economy generally, but also individually. So the personalization, which we'll talk about later, is key as well. Bonnie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would bring it up, in addition to this, kind of bring it up 10,000 feet as to what we're seeing with nonprofits in general, and then I'll kind of drill down to the employee piece. Even before we had the new administration in place, so going back to 2024, we were seeing a lot of movement within the nonprofits, a lot of people changing jobs. And I couldn't tell you exactly why that is, but we were seeing a lot of people either leave to start their own nonprofit or their own business, or they were shifting from one nonprofit to another. And I can tell you now, 6 months later, some of those people who moved and changed jobs are actually regretting that move, right? Because they were going to something that was kind of more of a startup that was exciting, and they're trying to do something different, but they didn't necessarily have the infrastructure, the funding to sustain some of what we're seeing right now. And so they're in this very precarious position. So again, like at 10,000 feet, what we're seeing is a lot of uncertainty, and Blake touched on this with funding. And that uncertainty in funding, and some of it is certain, right? Some of it they're actually seeing now a lot of funders are pulling back, and it's having very significant impacts on those nonprofits, especially for those nonprofits that have been heavily dependent on government funding and don't have like a diverse stream of funding that they use, right? So they're really struggling. Then their employees are struggling on top of that. And then if we want to layer one more piece of this perfect storm, we're seeing an increase in demand for the services that the nonprofits are providing. So they're feeling the pressure of, reduced funding. They're getting pressure from their employees, and they're getting pressure from the community that they serve as well. So we're seeing those three things come together kind of in a perfect storm. Another piece that we're starting to see a little bit of, and we saw this during COVID, and it was very encouraging during COVID, is nonprofits starting to partner in new ways. So kind of saying, we're not going to worry about things in the past. We've got urgent needs right now, both internally and externally. How do we work together to meet those needs? And we're actually hearing some conversation from nonprofits that are considering something more official. So not just kind of collaborating in the moment, but is this an opportunity to have some consolidation of some of the work? So if they're serving this, similar audiences, but providing different services, is there an opportunity to kind of pool those resources and create a different type of structure that can withstand some of the changes that we're seeing in 2025? Now, Blake, to your point here, we don't see a big difference between the for-profit and nonprofit space generally when it comes to the employees. We see where the financial stress comes from is largely related to income and very much related to savings. And I think, Blake, do you have some information in this deck about savings?
Not other than what's on that slide, that the one key measure.
Yeah, I'll just, I'll add on the savings piece, and then I'm gonna punt it back over to you because I know you've got a lot of data on this. Is what I keep thinking that we're in a situation that's similar to COVID. I recognize it's not a pandemic, but there's a lot of factors that are all kind of converging in the same way that we saw in COVID, and where we saw people who kind of fared well through that period of time with people that had savings, and people who really struggled. It's kind of intuitive, didn't have any backup savings. So they weren't ready for that economic shock. So Blake, what would you add to that?
Yeah, so fully agree. And I what we don't have, I realize in the deck, is the trend in these measures. And, if we look at the past couple of years, interestingly, savings actually was higher during the COVID years because people were getting various subsidies and things like that. But now without that, we are seeing debt increase substantially. We're seeing savings rates decrease at a very rapid rate. And so these measures, although what we're showing is a point in time, the trend is not our friend in this case. And then Carol, I think there was a question in the chat regarding what these numbers are a percentage of. And so this is the total number of employees who have responded, across all employers, and then also all employees across all nonprofits that we have in our database. So just by way of measure, that is, from all employees, that's, tens of thousands, if not kind of close to, 100,000 employees. And on the nonprofit side, it's a smaller population, but still in the thousands of individuals who have responded to this. So it's a good data set, to be able to kind of get some good insights. Yeah.
And so Bonnie, you touched on this trend that you saw in terms of, or the trends in terms of folks leaving their position, and then turnover is always a problem. I think I used to joke when I was at Worldwide, it's a United Way problem. It's not necessarily a United Way problem, but we do experience a lot of turnover in this sector, and financial stress probably doesn't help in terms of trying to keep employees, employee retention. So Bonnie and Blake, what are some things that you're seeing with your nonprofit clients, or even just in general, to help with this employee retention piece and trying to keep the good talent when you can only offer so much?
What I see to be most effective, and it's in the nonprofit space and in the for-profit space, is it does come down to compensation. Now, that compensation doesn't always have to be just salary. And what has attracted a lot of people to nonprofit space is not only that they can fulfill their own, passion and values around the work, but even if the salary is a little bit lower, sometimes the benefits are, there's better benefits packages or other elements of their compensation that kind of makes up for that difference. So I think that's a really important piece of it. What we've seen work well in both for-profit and nonprofit are things like a match savings program. So we're seeing some companies, and this is still very few that are doing this, but they enable emergency savings alongside of their retirement savings. So just the same way you could direct some of your funds into your retirement account, you could direct some of your funds into an emergency savings account. The ones that are doing really well then also offer a match component. And so those are kind of handled differently, but it does set someone up for protection in situations like this.
And adding to that, interestingly, what we are seeing is employers increasingly are turning to financial wellness programs as a benefit to help with recruiting and retention. And Bonnie mentioned earlier, people jumping ship to go to, try and find a higher salary, a higher paid position. But what people are realizing is sometimes it's the total compensation that matters, the benefits that are included. So someone might jump ship for a higher salary, but they don't realize that they're giving up great value in the benefits that are already available to them. And so part of what we see is the utility of a financial wellness program is helping employees understand the value of the benefits that they have. So this is not all about savings and reducing debt and things like this, but it is also about raising awareness of the benefits that are available to someone. And so we see greater participation rates in the benefits that are being offered as people go through LifeCents. And I think a great example, and it's a little bit of an obscure one, but it makes a great point, which is if in the process of evaluating someone's needs, we ask, if you were to be out of work due to illness or injury for 3 months, could you and your family afford that? And a lot of people are certainly say no, or I'm not sure. But when you say, well, hey, did you know your employer offers something called short-term disability? And then people match that up and be like, oh, that's what that thing is, and that's how it's used. When it comes time to open enrollment, then they're going to be more inclined to sign up for that benefit. And you can apply that across the board. When people better understand their 401k or their 403b or their any other retirement program, they're going to be more inclined to participate. And then you're like, oh, did you know that you're leaving money on the table if you don't take advantage of the employer match? It may seem basic to maybe a lot of us on the call, but these are the things that many employees just don't know and they don't understand and they don't act on. In fact, Andrew, if you don't mind going to slide 8, I think this is kind of an interesting perspective here. So, good financial health should be easy, just spend less and save more, right? As much like getting in, taking care of ourselves physically, it's eat less and walk more, but behaviors are very different than knowledge. And so this is data from LifeCents where, financial literacy scores, financial knowledge scores are higher than the actual health scores, which are based on behaviors. So kind of bringing this all together is having providing access to something where people are able to turn that information to action, which is, here is the pathway. Once you understand about your benefits, here's how I can access those benefits. Here's how I can enroll those benefits or take advantage of those. So from a recruiting and retention perspective, definitely seeing financial wellness as an arrow in the quiver of HR, managers and directors.
And Blake, can you speak to the assessment? Because I also think about the makeup of many United Ways. You have a really diverse age population. So you have a lot of young talent that is coming out, first job out of college, second job. And then you also have folks who are more seasoned. And I imagine the CEOs and operations people on this call are kind of juggling, well, I want to do the best that's the best for everyone, but I don't know where to start.
It's a great question, and I have somewhat of what some might deem as a controversial answer, because I know that it's like, well, you have baby boomers to Gen X to Gen Y to Gen Z and all points in between, and how do you first of all, the idea of meeting people where they are, the way that you meet someone where they are is to ask questions about them and not presume that you know what their needs are. And that is where we are very, very, very focused on providing a very comprehensive financial health checkup. And so if you think about a primary care physician for financial health, we do the same thing your primary care physician does for your physical health. We're doing the same for your financial health. So we want to do that diagnostic and say, okay, well, let's do the basics. Let's make sure we understand where you are on those 8 metrics that we saw earlier in the earlier graph. But then also we understand, someone's going to come in and they might have symptoms, much like someone might go into their doctor and be like, yep, we've checked your weight, your blood pressure, your BMI, et cetera. But someone might come in with other symptoms like chest pain. Well, the doctor is going to need to ask follow-up questions to determine if that chest pain is heartburn or heart attack, because the treatment and the care is very different. And so that is something that is very important with financial wellness, is not assuming that we know where people are, what they need. Let people tell their stories, show that you listen. By listening, you show that you care. By showing you that you care, you're going to have people engaged. And the more engaged people are, the better outcomes you'll see. And so I think that that is the foundation, for any financial wellness program to be successful is having that, having that starting point. Bonnie, I mean, through our work together, I think we see this in different, a lot of different ways with the various initiatives. And actually, one other thought, also kind of limiting financial wellness programs, saying, hey, this program is designed for this generation, this program is designed for this one. Here's where it gets a little controversial, which is, if someone says that they have a credit score of 600, is that person 25, 35, 45, or 65? It could be any of those. And so presuming that, we need to make sure this program for Gen Z, Gen Y is focused on these things, it's missing a huge part of meeting people where they are. It's like, oh, people in their 20s are not ready to buy homes. Well, there are a lot of people in their 20s that are ready to buy homes. There are a lot that are not. But if you presume that if you are prescriptive and think that if you design programs that are based by generation, you're missing the opportunity to truly meet people where they are and demonstrate that you understand what they need by listening, et cetera. So, Bonnie, any thoughts on that? Ramble?
Well, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, Blake. You know what? I want to go back to one of the first things you said, which was around making sure that people are aware of the benefits that they have. And I want everyone to kind of sit on that for a minute, because I think that's one of the most important things that we can do right now. You know, so there's things that we can do to prepare for situations like this, and there's things that we can do in the moment. And I think what we can do in the moment is a big one right there, just making people aware of what their benefits are, and also helping them to understand what the value of those benefits are. So I think that's super important, Blake. You also have, I think in this, you've got a slide around, I think, getting rid of this kind of the stigma, you know, like talking about the financial situation is so important. Do you know which slide that's on? Remember, so, you know,
slide, I think slide 10, maybe?
Yeah. So again, as we're talking about like being in the moment, where we know that, geez, the numbers that I see are as high as like 73 or 75% of people are struggling financially. We know that from the Financial Health Network, they say that 43 million are financially vulnerable in the country. And that's I think, a conservative estimate. So we're, as Blake said, we're seeing savings rates drop significantly. We're seeing credit drop. We're seeing debt levels increase very significantly. It's happening fast. So what are the things that we can do right now? And I think one of them is to create this environment where you can talk about money and finances, that people can work together. So even I know that my colleagues at Wells Fargo are, you know, I consider practically family. I mean, they're some of my closest friends. I spend a lot of time with them. I wouldn't necessarily want to have a team meeting about my personal finances, but I certainly would talk to them, you know, if we went out to lunch or had coffee or something, about things that I was looking at or struggling with. So to the extent that you can create opportunities for those discussions within your organizations, where you can kind of create this safe space, whether it's bringing in speakers, as Blake said too, you know, it could be educating around benefits, bring these topics in and make it normal, and try and reduce the shame that people feel. One of the things that LifeCents does very well is it creates a community within this tool that Blake has designed, this platform. And it makes you feel like I am not alone, right? So as you're going through it, and you may see a result that says, you know, we see that you've got, you know, your debt level is like 30% or 40%. It would then share with you X% of people using this platform or in the country are also experiencing that same thing. And it just gives you this little bit of an exhale where you say, thought it was just me, but I'm not alone in this. So that's another thing that I would pull from a lot of your what you're sharing, Blake, is just this sense of community, that you're not alone, that these are common things that are happening, and that there are solutions.
And I'll add to that. We had a very interesting, very successful initiative with the AARP Foundation a number of years ago that was designed to help seniors that had really no emergency savings, no safety net whatsoever. It was designed to help them save their first $400. And in a matter of less than a year, we had about 50,000 seniors sign up and go through and save just over $2 million collectively, which was a huge milestone. I mean, so that really kind of shows that was working. But I think what was also most interesting, and kind of going back to preconceived notions about who's going to engage with a program like this. And so you think about seniors who are, really kind of low, not even moderate income, but low income, really financially fragile, and people, seniors are not supposed to use technology. They're technology adverse, and so there was all this discussion in the planning stages of this. How are we going to provide interventions for seniors that are not not willing to use technology? Well, first of all, we had 50,000 people do this, but when we look at the, we created a community feature, like almost like a Facebook page where people could post questions and provide feedback. I cannot tell you how active that thread was. I mean, that page was in terms of thread. We had hundreds of threads with thousands of replies and responses of people sharing their experiences, their questions, their tips. And I think it just debunked a lot of preconceived notions by people who did not have those lived experiences. And so it's like, hey, you know what? Seniors who are financially at risk actually engaged at a very high rate with technology, and they were very willing to share their experiences. And so I think, to Bonnie's point, is creating a culture where money is not taboo. We're not saying that you need to have something where people are disclosing their income and savings balances, but just making financial wellness, much like many businesses have health wellness programs, but financial wellness should be part of that wellness consideration.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. And you talked about, so thank you to everyone who's kind of echoing those thoughts in the chat. I think most of the folks on this call and maybe those listening as well are in positions of leadership, and maybe it's just intimidating to get started. Where do I start? Where do I turn? How do I bring this conversation? And as nonprofit leaders, also so super focused on those you're serving. So you're dealing with financial issues with clients, people calling into 211 needing support, and realizing also that those issues can exist within your own employee base. Bonnie, Blake, do you have any suggestions for how folks can get this conversation started if they've never entered into a financial wellness program before? If this is something where they know that their staff needs it, but they're not really sure how to bring it up, any suggestions or tips for folks to kind of get that conversation started?
Bonnie, if I may, I'll jump in on that. I think one, Andrea, I would actually rewind a little bit where you make a great point where nonprofit leaders may recognize that there's a need, that they don't know how to get started, but also what we see is there's more often than you might imagine, employers broadly, not just nonprofits, assume that their employees are fine, and actually financial wellness programs are not needed. And it tends to be a very bad misstep. And Bonnie was citing some very important statistics earlier. I think we all know, 60+% of Americans could not come up with $400 in cash if they faced, an unexpected expense. And debt levels are increasing at an alarming rate, et cetera. That is a representation of the American consumer, and those American consumers are your employees. And so we have a really interesting case study that I'm happy to share with everyone after this. We were working with a hospital system here in Northern Virginia, DC area, and we were introduced through a benefit provider, and the benefit provider was recommending the healthcare system to implement a financial wellness program for their employees. And the healthcare provider was like, no, our employees are fine. They're well paid in the medical and healthcare field. They have great benefits. But they were like, well, actually, but also admittedly, our 401k contributions rates are not where we would think they would need to be. But at first they were reluctant. And so we offered to do what we call a 45-day financial wellness challenge, just to get that baseline information on the financial health of the employees. And it came back that 88% of the employees, and this is a very large healthcare system, 20,000 plus employees. We didn't get everybody, but still it was several thousand people, but 88% indicated that they were either stressed or extremely stressed about their financial situation, and 63% indicated that they felt like they were living paycheck to paycheck. And so it turns out that as we dug a little deeper, the reason people were stressed is, yes, they are highly educated, but with that education comes a lot of student loan debt. And it was the student loan debt that was preventing them from making the payments or making the contributions to the 401k. And so we were able to get that data, share that with the employer, and then we had something to respond to. And so what we did is we brought in two groups. One, someone that specializes in helping with student loan debt management. And then we also brought in financial coaches and counselors. And so we were able to address very specific problems. So rather than just kind of throwing a very broad net saying we need to improve people's financial health, we were able to identify the specific areas that were needed. So I think very specifically is starting with some type of, again, listen to your employees. Don't presume that don't be prescriptive. So some type of financial health evaluation, financial health assessment, financial health checkup is a great starting point, because then you have the data that you can respond to, and then you can identify the next steps. And on the slide that's still showing, I think what's interesting is that you can leverage the resources from other community partners that provide services that might be relevant to your employees. And we do that with all of the Wells Fargo Foundation initiatives. We are leveraging nonprofits and community organizations to provide resources and capabilities to help people improve their financial well-being. And then the last bullet on the slide actually also applies, which is you probably offer a lot of benefits that would be of value to your employees. If they're not already engaged in using them, connect them to those. Both of those are no cost, no additional cost among the benefits, but there's really no cost to connect people to your existing benefits. There's no cost to connect people to community resources. So I think there's some, very tangible ways to get started, without a heavy lift, for sure. Bonnie?
Yeah, Blake, I would completely agree with your suggestion to start with understanding the needs. And I would go just one step further and say, having a conversation or surveying people with kind of your own survey probably isn't enough, because very often what we see are people don't know what they don't know, right? So if you were to ask someone, how are you doing financially? Someone might say, I'm okay, I'm hanging in there. Well, that could be because everyone around them is in the same situation. But if you really got kind of underneath the hood, you'd say, what? No, you're in trouble. Like we need immediate intervention. We have people that will say to us too, things like, my credit's a little bit below where I would like it, but I'm really working on building my credit. And as we kind of dig down into how they're doing that, we have found people that are actually using like prepaid cards, but because they're plastic, they think that they're credit cards and that it's improving their credit to use those prepaid cards. So there's like a fundamental misunderstanding of what credit building is. So they may say they know, but as you dig down a little bit deeper, they don't. So to the extent that you can use an assessment, whether that's through the Financial Health Network, I think CFPB has a score, Blake has a tool that does a great needs assessment. That could be really helpful in identifying those priorities.
And I realize that there's some comments in the chat. Thank you to everyone. Hannah, I'm reading yours. Going back to, it bothers me that talk of finances is so hush-hush. Kind of building on this, where having that culture where people, it's so helpful for people to have a perspective, and as Bonnie mentioned earlier, that they are not alone. The fact that someone feels a certain way, it's like, oh, I have too much debt, I've got $5,000 in debt, and people are like, you only have $5,000 in debt or something like that. It's very helpful for people to have some perspective that they're not alone, and am I doing okay? The fact that I'm carrying a little bit of debt, how terrible is that? Well, it's like, there's a lot goes into that. So definitely appreciate that comment. And then what was the other one? Oh, Kathy, great observation as well, that it's hard to transition the programs that help the client and bring them internally to employees. And I think that is something that is, we definitely have data on this, and interviews with employees across the board, but with nonprofit employees, they're like, yes, we are we spend our time taking care of others, but we don't do a great job of taking care of ourselves all the time. And I think that's related to that. And so I think part of that is, again, to me, that is the awareness. It's like, okay, it's a great observation. Now, how do we tackle this? If you know that you're doing this externally for other people, then what's a pathway to bring this internally?
And I do want to leave some time for questions, but I just, while you're thinking of your questions and you're writing them in the chat, or we can come off mute, I'd love for Bonnie and Blake to kind of share. Blake, you had mentioned the one hospital system, but are there other, I know there are there other examples of nonprofit initiatives, partnerships that you all have worked on and that you've seen successful, and maybe you can share a little bit about why they were successful or why they are successful?
Goodness. So we are very fortunate that we work with amazing partners and amazing clients who are committed to bringing financial wellness to their employees or to those they serve. And certainly I'll let Bonnie, I won't steal your thunder on all the initiatives that we're working on together, but I will use our client, the United Way, who is our client, a fantastic example of a program that was implemented very well, where let's say they had about 330-ish employees. Within the first 48 hours, we had half of those employees who had registered for LifeCents and had gone through and completed our financial health checkup, as well as a couple other modules. And within the first 30 days, we had 83% of all those employees who had done the same thing. And I think what contributed to that success, or at least two things. From the top, it was the CEO, the president, who sent out an email to all of their employees saying, "Hey, I just signed up for this for LifeCents, and I went through, and hey, it was pretty cool, and it was very interesting, and helped me out," or whatever. There was an endorsement from the senior most champion of that organization. I think that that contributed to that first 50% within the first 48 hours. We did offer some level of incentive for participation for the first 6 weeks, actually. And so people would go in, if you want your name to be put in the drawing for this gift card, people did it. But here's what we know is, once we get people into LifeCents, even if what we see is, even when the incentives run out, people will continue on with their journey in the program. We believe in data supports and the focus groups that we've held. People find value, and they're like, "Wow, this was helpful. I'm glad I did this." And so it's not, the incentive is great, but whatever it takes to get someone in and provide them something of value as far as valuable experience, where they're like, "I'm glad I did that." That's what I personally, from my business perspective, I want people to walk away and say, "Wow, I am glad I did that." And that's, if that's the net promoter score, then that's mine. Yeah, so I mean, that's one example. I mean, Bonnie, we have so many others working together.
Yeah, I want to start in maybe a little bit of a different place, which is, if you think about finances, personal finances, we keep using the term financial health, which is just a fancy way of saying your personal financial situation. It runs through everything all of us do. So if we had more time, I'd say challenge us, see if the work that your nonprofit is doing doesn't have an undercurrent of financial health. I would think that almost everything all of you do has that undercurrent. So when you're seeing clients or you're serving the community, whether it's for housing insecurity or helping someone who has food insecurity, or helping a new to country start their own business, anything like that, there's all an undercurrent of financial health. And so when we look at our bankers at Wells Fargo, we know that they are as effective as they are in their own personal financial journey, right? So if they're struggling financially, it's very difficult for them to provide any kind of advice and guidance to their customers. So we're really working hard to make sure that our bankers are well versed in the not only knowledge, but they've got the capability and exercise the behaviors so that they have a good financial situation themselves. We see the same thing in the nonprofit space. And there's kind of, I think if you go to school to be a psychiatrist, they make you go through therapy. We say the same thing. If you're going to school to be a financial coach or a financial counselor, if you're getting that certification, you should probably go through financial coaching and counseling yourself, so you can get that kind of mirror image of yourself. I would suggest that most of your employees, a way to kind of position this is whether they're talking to someone directly about their personal finances or indirectly, that topic is coming up in probably every conversation if they're serving clients in some way, shape, or form. So I think it's almost imperative that we make sure that these nonprofit employees who are serving the community have a good working knowledge of personal finance and have the tools and resources that they need to be successful themselves so they can help others. So kind of putting that as, kind of the context, we have seen fantastic results with individual financial coaching and counseling. Now, the tool that Blake is talking about, LifeCents, is fantastic because it really mirrors the financial coaching experience. It does it in a digital format, so we think of it as like a virtual coach, but it's a great way to scale financial coaching, offer it to the masses, provide a safe way for people to engage with that experience and get confident and comfortable. But there's also many people who would benefit from the in-person financial coaching and counseling as well. So within Blake's tool, that, as he's mentioned, we use in a number of situations, at some point in the process, some people then do get connected to a personal coach, an individual. So if you've got people that you're working with within your teams now, within your organization, and they have an immediate need, if they're not just trying to explore, but they're closer to being what we would call financial crisis, try and find a way to connect them to a financial coach or counselor. And as we touched on earlier, there very well may be opportunities for you to partner with and collaborate with financial coaching organizations like Cities for Financial Empowerment or LISC or International Rescue Community. International Rescue Community. And there's also small players all across the country too. Maybe there's something you can do with some level of reciprocity with those organizations, but try and make that financial coaching available to your employees, because we do see very significant impact from that exercise because it's so individualized. So that's not really one of our success stories, but the success piece is that when we pair together kind of this technology solution that allows someone to self-service and then pair it together with high touch, like financial coaching and counseling, we see people really making a measurable difference in their situation.
All right, we have a few minutes left. I'd love to open it up for questions. You can come off mute, or if you prefer to type it in the chat, I can read it aloud. Does anyone have any questions for Blake or Bonnie or both?
May I ask is anyone currently, does anyone have a financial wellness program internally for employees?
We actually have two programs here at the United Way of Greater Bedford. One is a financial wellness at work, and one's a financial literacy program for women. So we actually pilot those programs, but we work with other companies. So the financial literacy for women is a 10-week course at nighttime, and they're all women from all different backgrounds. And we facilitate different bankers come in, investments come in, different people each week. That's a different topic. So they walk away, hopefully by the end, they've improved their credit score, they started savings, just helping them understand that. So we have that program. And then we have another program that's financial wellness at work, where we go into we're trying to go to for-profits, but a lot of them have actually signed up as a bunch of nonprofits, which is great. So we go in and we actually have, right now we had one employee, but now we have 1.5 who do it. And we spend about 3 hours a week where their employees can meet with us privately, and we help them connect them to different places to do it. But what's crazy that you say that is we do not offer it to our current employees. We offer it to everybody else, but not to our current employees. So our current employees do take the financial literacy for women, because we have 20 employees, only one is male, the rest are women. So a lot of those women have taken that course. So we offer it that way.
Amazing. And I'm sorry, how long have these programs been in place?
So the Financial Wellness at Work has been in place for a year, and the financial literacy program, we just launched our own program that started a couple weeks ago. We used to partner with somebody else and just sponsor it. So now we've launched our own program that started about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, awesome.
Wow.
Amazing.
And the financial literacy for women is free. We don't charge for it. And the Financial Wellness at Work, we do charge the businesses, but the employees don't pay anything. It's the businesses who pay.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, we definitely found, I mean, there's no situation in our model where employees are paying for access to the program. That's always the employer or another sponsor or benefactor is providing the access. You just don't want to create that hurdle.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I just want to share a comment or like some thoughts around if we're out serving people in the community, which I think is such a great point on financial well-being, wellness, but we haven't gone through it ourselves in our own program. I think that's such a great point. And I think in a lot of counties, there is available free credit counseling. And I know that was available in our county through consumer credit counseling, which I'm not sure if that's all over the country or if that's more of a local thing in the state of Illinois. But it really was beneficial for me. I went through it with my mother-in-law, who was an older adult that was struggling to stay in her own home. And as a result, she ended up having no other option but to get a reverse mortgage, but it allowed her to stay in her home. And as a result, she never had to leave. And that was her goal. And the family there was no money. There was really no equity in the property. So they wouldn't have gotten much out of it anyways. And so it really was beneficial, but it was through that experience that caused me, after I was in banking at the time, and then went to work at the United Way. And I felt like I was a much better advocate for others and dealing with the financial part because I had an understanding of it for myself and my family. So thanks for mentioning that, Bonnie.
Yeah, Carol, that's super powerful. And, I think the other thing is we don't know what we don't know, right? So you mentioned the consumer credit counseling, CCCs, they're affiliated with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling as well. And National Foundation for Credit Counseling does a lot of work in the debt management space. And there are, I'm going to, call it bad actors in the credit space and in the debt space that are hard to spot. And it's very pervasive. And when we're in situations like we're in right now, where we're seeing credit decline rapidly and debt spike, you're going to see a lot more of these bad actors, and they go after the most vulnerable people. Now, if you've not been in these situations yourself, you're not even aware that this is happening around you. Like there's things that commercials I see on TV or I'll hear them on the radio, and it's not connecting with me because it doesn't look like it's predatory. But then I'll find out in a conversation with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, like, oh yeah, that particular organization, let us tell you what they're doing. And your hair would stand on that, right? So to the extent that you can open yourself up for that type of education and information, even if you think you're really well versed, you're going to continually learn because there's new ways to do bad things, every day. And the most vulnerable people are the ones that are getting caught up in this.
Yeah, there's a lot of sophistication, and there are a lot of products and solutions that are coming out as financial wellness programs or products, but the back end is some type of predatory product, or the umbrella is financial wellness. Look at the good we're doing, but then you get into it, and you're like, and I do try and keep my finger on the pulse of what's out there. You get in there and you're like, that's how they make their money. They're trying to sell you a product, or they're something that's just going to, contribute to that cycle of debt or whatever it may be. And I think that's one of the things that we try and do. And I think we're very fortunate with Wells Fargo Foundation is creating this safe space where it's a trusted environment, and any partners are vetted. And so, people that go through and they're connecting to those coaches, those counselors, as Bonnie mentioned, are a very important part of the process. People know that those are, kind of have the good housekeeping seal of approval. or maybe it's America Saves Pledge, which is, just these credible organizations with credible solutions. I think that's a huge part of that, because people are like, where do I start? Who do I trust? And so creating that trusted environment is key to get people to engage. Otherwise, people are like, nope. Or, from an employee perspective, if anyone feels like Big Brother is watching and has access to your information, they're not going to sign up.
We
Go ahead. Yeah, we're at time, I think, Carol.
Yeah, we're getting close to our time. So I just want to start first by saying thank you to all of you for joining today's session. There was so much great, comments in the chat and just reflections as people were, a few had to jump off early, but they were just saying it was really informative and very amazing information. And then secondly, I want to thank Bonnie and Blake and Andrea for their willingness to be a part of today's panel and really elevating this to another level. We had launched a few years ago a wellness series. And when the session was submitted, I thought to myself, well, it's a little different than the sessions we've had in the past, which were centered around like burnout prevention and stress relief. But as I reflected on that thought process today, a lot of these financial concerns create the stress. And then we carry that to work and it creates even more stress, which could potentially create the burnout. So I think it's cyclical and we need to be thinking about this. And so I love the idea of having even a wellness series centered around financial for the future, that this could dovetail into like a 3-part series, which could be really important and very valuable to all of the people across the country that are working in nonprofits that may not have this available to them. So just thank you to everybody for your participation, and to Andrea, Blake, and Bonnie for being here. Before we wrap up, I want to say thanks to Kirsten for joining us today as our newest team member of United Way Next, and remind everybody that we have all of our events listed on our website at unitedwaynext.org. We have a few personal discovery sessions that are new this year that are coming up in the coming weeks. So if you haven't checked that out, next week we have one on StrengthsFinder that you might find interesting, that will be co-hosted with 2 guest speakers, Kathleen Wolf and Anna Murphy. Anna is a CEO up in Michigan. And tomorrow we have our planned giving learning session. So for those of you who are working in the resource development area, you may find interest if you haven't already registered for that. And then later next week, we have a session, a part 2 session by Brooke Manville. And if you weren't a part of the part 1 session, I encourage you to check it out. I think you'll find interested in that as well. So with that said, just thanks to all of you for being here and the things that you're doing across the network and across the nonprofits to serve not only the clients in the community, but the employees at your local United Ways and nonprofits who benefit so greatly from your advocacy and your support. So with that said, thank you again and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you.